Welcome to Fully Booked, the bookish podcast where I'll chat about all things book and reading related. Whether you're a new or a pro reader, there's something for everyone to learn. I'm here to help you on your reading journey and find that next great read that will keep you fully booked. Hello, readers, and welcome to episode 49 of Fully Booked. I'm your host, Natalie, and today's episode is going to be a reading wrap-up, but we are changing things up once again because if you guys had noticed, I did not post separate July and August reading wrap-ups because we are going to be combining both months in one episode today. So we are trying that out for now, and hopefully you guys still enjoy. I have no clue how long today's episode is going to turn out since I'm doing the 2-in-1. So definitely get comfortable, get your favorite snack or drink ready, and let's talk about all the books I read in July and August. But before we get into the rest of today's wrap-up, I did want to debrief about something that I actually posted a couple weeks ago by the time you're seeing today's episode. I want to talk about how I had the chance to go to a romance book festival back at the end of last month, and it was so cool. It was actually hosted by the Toronto Public Library, and it was all for free, which was honestly pretty blessed considering the price tag that Indigo and other venues are putting on these book signing events. But yeah, it was really fun to get to go. I did end up going alone, unfortunately, but I still really wanted to go because I signed up for 2 panels and 2 signings, and I'm never really gonna get the chance to meet my favorite authors in Toronto probably for a while. And I actually did get the chance to go to 2 book signings and meet Ashley Poston and Annabelle Monaghan, which if I find the photos, I'll try to put them up there on the screen for you guys who are watching. But yeah, that was just such a fun and cool experience still. And I do have to tell you, meeting Annabelle Monaghan was such a joy and delight. You guys probably know by now, I've mentioned her a couple times in the pod. I've read her books fairly recently and close together over the past few months, so they just hold such a special place in my heart. When I got to meet her, guys, I cannot tell you, I was actually pretty nervous. And it was the first signing that I went to because you had to sign up for time slots to go to each of the book signings just to keep things running more smoothly and organized at the event. And I was honestly thinking for days leading up to the festival what I wanted to ask, because I can imagine that authors get tired of being asked the same questions over and over the more events and book tours and signings that they do. And I figured a lot of these authors who are from the States probably haven't been to Toronto. Maybe it's their first time. So I'll ask her how she likes Toronto and if it's her first time. So I go up, I'm in line, and then I think I ended up saying something like, "Welcome to Toronto, how are you enjoying it so far?" She told me, oh yeah, she was enjoying it a lot. It was her first time. And she said it was very nice to get to be able to visit the city because she did marry a Canadian, which was something cool to learn. So we talked for a bit, and then I was kind of nervous again because after we talked about that, I didn't really know what else to say or to ask next. So then I handed her my books and she started signing. She's asking, oh, have you read both of these books yourself? And I told her, oh yeah, I've read all of your books. And she seemed pleasantly surprised, which kind of surprised me because I would hope that if you're going to an author's book signing that you've read more than one book. Although, to be fair, I did go to an author the other month where I hadn't read her books anyways. Yeah, she seemed pleasantly surprised. And then I told her that, yeah, I love your stories. I always recommend you to anybody who asks me for a romance author recommendation. She's as delightful as, how do I describe it? The way that she puts words on the paper is the way that she comes across in real life. She's just very kind, poised. She also looked put together in the dress that she was wearing. Such a great experience overall. And if you happen to be watching, hello again. Thank you for writing and the stories that you tell, and I would love the chance to interview you if you ever have the time. Before we get into today's wrap-up, let's do Doll of the Day quickly. So to start off, for my drink, I actually saw a YouTube short the other day where she was making a iced salted honey latte, and I did make the iced version the other day just to try out, but today since I'm filming in the morning, I actually felt like a hot coffee, so I just made a hot version of that, which I have to say is very delicious, but it really is easy to make because literally all you need is honey, a pinch of salt, whatever milk or creamer that you like to put in your coffee. The flavor profile is also really nice because I actually find it's actually less sweet than if you were to put regular sugar in your coffee, and it's just a really nice flavor for all year round, which I appreciate. And then for outfit of the day, you guys can see I have a pretty simple outfit on for today, which is just I have this kind of green looking halter top. And then for books I'm currently reading, this is where things get interesting because I'm not filming this wrap up all on the same day. So the books I'm currently reading, you're probably gonna see me talk about in the next couple clips in today's wrap up. But the first book that I'm still currently reading is Firefly Lane by Kristen Hanna. You guys remember from my summer TBR episode, this is one of the books that I put on there, and we're finally getting to it. The only thing I will say about this book so far is that Kristen Hanna's writing style I feel like has evolved quite a bit, but I think for some of the atmospheric writing and the vibes, I am enjoying it so far. And then the third book that I'm still reading is This One Summer, and this one's actually a graphic novel, which is why I'm only about a third of the way through. I've just been picking it up here and there really slowly. For those of you watching on video, I'll show you guys. Yeah, some cool illustrations. So to start off, I'm just gonna go in order of each month in terms of the stats and then the individual book reviews. So I'm gonna give you guys my July reading stats, which are I was able to complete 8 books. And then in terms of my monthly hopefuls that I want to read, I read 4 out of 6. Although I technically will read 5 because, as you guys just saw, I'm still in the middle of This One Summer. And then 2 of the books that I read in July were from my summer TBR, which are 28 Summers and The Wedding People. And I am going to talk about those in a dedicated TBR follow-up episode, so make sure to stay tuned for that. And best of all for July, I had no DNFs, which is pretty good. I think I DNF'd 1 book in June still. So I think I've had, I want to say 2 months where I've had no DNFs. Overall, not too bad. I wish I could have read a little bit more, but I definitely had a couple periods of busyness and then also just wanting to slow down and take some breaks. Also, I was in Chicago at the very beginning of the month, and I noticed that I tend to not read when I'm on like a very like city kind of touristy vacation. Anyways, with that, let's actually get into each of the books that I read. So the first book that I actually completed in July was The Honeymoon Crashers by Christina Lauren, which I gave 3 stars, and I forgot to give this one a spice rating, but honestly, it's kind of negligible, at least in terms of the amount, because this book is a novella, and I think it was about 4 hours, maybe almost 5 hours in terms of audiobook length. Oh, and just a note that I'm pretty sure this book is only on audio, so just a note if you are trying to go and find the book afterwards. But yeah, I don't have much to say about this one. It was short and sweet, and I guess if you don't know, it's kind of a sequel to The Honeymoon Crashers, and it basically follows Olive's sister, Amy, who's the one who originally got married in The Honeymoon Crashers, but finds herself single again. And it also follows Ethan's best man, Brody, because basically in this one, Ethan and Olive are finally getting married. Amy and Brody basically have to come together to help plan and execute their wedding. And we are set back in Maui, which I have to admit was very fun, made for a very fun setting, a good summer read. But overall, I don't have much to say about this. I mean, I think even if I had read it recently, I don't think I'd be too attached. The Unhoneymooners wasn't my favorite book of Christina Lauren's to begin with. And so, yeah, same with this one. I honestly just picked it up randomly because I really wanted something to binge and chill out on the car ride home from Chicago. So definitely if you have road trip coming up or if you have a very long commute, then this one is perfect to just pop in. If you're a bigger fan of Christina Lauren, then you probably will enjoy this more than I did. And then the next book I read in July was Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. This is actually one of the few physical copies I have to show off in today's wrap up. And this book is basically just all about things like vulnerability, shame, and guilt, and how we process and frame those as individuals. I have to say, I feel like the topic of this book wasn't really of the most interest or relevance to me. It's one that honestly has been on my TBR for years, and then for some reason I picked up the physical copy just last year, put it on my shelf with all the intent to read it, but I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I thought I would. I feel like I was just in a bigger sort of personal development era, maybe like earlier on in my 20s compared to now. Yeah, this type of nonfiction book wasn't hitting. And I've been finding that's been the theme for 2025. Besides memoirs, I feel like it hasn't been the greatest year for nonfiction reads. Like every single nonfiction, business, personal development book has not been reading that well for me. I will say some of the research that was done in this book, especially I think the differences between men and women and how we process vulnerability was quite interesting. And I would say that if you are in a field or area that is more linked to these topics, like in psychology or the humanities maybe, you might find this book really interesting. Oh, and I forgot if I said, I rated this 4 stars. I don't even remember. Sometimes I just start talking and I'm like, I don't even remember if I said the rating or not. Still a decent read. She is a fairly good writer and she's also a very great speaker. And I will say that I did audiobook, I want to say about half of this book, and Brene Brown narrates the audiobook herself, and she has the most wonderful, calming speaking voice. So definitely a plus if you do decide to audiobook this one. Okay, third book that I read in July was Mile High by Liz Tomford. If you guys remember my June wrap up, I did start with The Right Move by her first, and I probably talked about it a little bit in the last wrap up, but I'll just go over it really quickly. Basically, it is a sports romance series that focuses on Chicago's pro athletes, namely hockey, baseball, and the second book, The Right Move, focused on a basketball player. Yeah, and we just follow them along on their journey, and namely the romance. So this one we focus on Stevie, who is the sister of Ryan Shea, and we also follow Xanders, who I think he's one of the captains for the Chicago hockey team. But yes, he is one of the stars of Chicago's hockey team, namely also because he is a big womanizer, for lack of a better word, and we follow them. And it was interesting going back and reading this one because a lot of people do not like Mile High. It is their least favorite in the series, and having finished it now, I can definitely see why that is. I think there were a couple reasons why I did not enjoy Mile High as much, namely because Xanders was honestly such a stereotypical womanizer. Like, it was almost comical. I feel like the way he was being described in the beginning and like how many women he would be thinking of and seeing at one time. I just thought it was a little bit much, and it just made his character very unlikable. I feel like actually most of the characters have been very likable, even though they're all honestly technically players. But Xanders, yeah, is probably the worst one portrayed in the series so far. And the other thing was, I did not like the third act breakup and conflict that we had in this one. I felt like it was almost a little bit self-sabotaging, and I don't know why. Whenever the conflict happens in a self-sabotaging way, it kind of bothers me. And yeah, I did not really like that in this book. Also, compared to The Right Move, this one, the attraction started out a lot more physical, which I did not necessarily enjoy. It would have been nicer if we'd established a little more emotional connection before we got into the physical. But these books honestly are spicy, so, you know, I think you kind of have to expect that. Yeah, my spice rating didn't tell you. This is kind of spicy open door, so be warned that you might just skip chapters like I did. But otherwise, there's something about the way Liz Tomford writes her character arc and development that just makes you really love or fall in love with the characters by the end of the book, even if you don't like them at the start of the book. So yeah, I think after this book, it gave me a lot of hope to continue through the rest of this series. And then the next book I read in July was none other than Jessa Hastings' Magnolia Park's Into the Dark, which is the third and final book on this Magnolia Park side of the universe. I feel like this is hard because I could potentially talk about this book for an hour, but I also can't talk about it that much right now because I still don't want to spoil it for people who haven't picked up the series. But hopefully by now my reviews will have convinced you guys to pick up the series. So I did end up rating this one 4.25 stars, and I gave it a 2.75 spice rating. Now I will say, with a final book in the series, I think you guys know by now, it can really make or break the entire series and how much you really come to love the characters. And this one definitely made this series and this side of the universe, because I think this was the first book that I rated over 4 stars. So yeah, the fact that this one was over 4 stars was just good. I think there was so much that went on in this book, because obviously I knew the big thing that was going to happen, but I didn't expect for us to deal with this other heavy thing in the capacity that we ended up doing. And I can't say much more than that without spoiling it for those of you who haven't read. Again, if you guys want to know what the series is about, I will leave you to look that up. But anyways, this book was weird because it was happy sad and sad sad because of all the things that we were dealing with, and obviously the main storyline for each of the main characters was really being tied up and coming to a conclusion. I feel like there were a couple things like with Magnolia's family that I kind of wish we had dealt with a little more and talked about in this book, or not even this book. I wish we had dealt with it in the last Magnolia book and not just all in this last book as we're trying to wrap up the side of the universe. But overall, I still really liked it. I still really enjoyed her writing style, and especially the writing in the very last few chapters of this book. Because of what was happening, I was in such tears. And it was happy tears, like I was relieved. I was enjoying reading about the ending we were getting to see our characters have, but it was also very sad to leave at least this side of the universe. I think especially because we don't know when the next Daisy books are gonna come out. I'm just kind of left in a weird waiting period now that I've finished the last Magnolia book. So if that review didn't convince you to pick up this series, I don't know what will. Also, if you guys want to hear me talk about the last book in way more detail than I just did right now, I did already post a spoiler review for Into the Dark on my Buy Me a Coffee page. So for those of you who are fans of Magnolia Parks, you can definitely go and check that out. And then we have two more books that I read in the month of July, starting with Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which was her latest released for this year. And I ended up rating this one 3.75 stars, and I did give it a 1.5 spice rating because there is romance in this book. And I have to say, first of all, I feel like this book, it just didn't quite live up to the hype and the potential of some of TJR's other works like Daisy Jones and the Six and The Seven Husbands. There was something about it that was just kind of off for me. I think to start off, I will say I did like some of the character development that we got for Joan, as well as her progression and relationship with Vanessa. But I feel like all the other characters in this book were just not memorable for me, and I could not tell you one single detail that I could remember about them. Especially some of the characters like Barbara were also just annoying me at some parts of the story and things that were happening between her and Joan, and I could just not get on board with liking them, unfortunately. And then I think honestly the biggest thing for me with this book, the pacing was just not it. By the way, sorry guys if that last clip kind of just ended abruptly. I was getting a phone call while I was recording. Anyways, I think what I was in the middle of saying is that the pacing of this book was just kind of off for me. It was just kind of slow in the middle. I wasn't really enjoying the day-to-day mundane descriptions we were getting. And I'm gonna be honest, I think the main reason is that space is just not the highest topic of interest for me. So the descriptions that we were getting were a little mundane and boring to me. And especially because I found the way the events were being described would be, oh, today started like this, we went and did training, we went and did this, and then this almost happened to me when I was in the simulator, and so on. And I just found that way of description, like, we were mostly just being told, but we're not actually getting that much description of what was actually happening day to day, and yeah, some of the events and things that they would have gone through while training. Especially because I imagine training, there is so much that goes on for real astronauts, or yeah, just anyone going into space or who's a part of a mission team at NASA. And there could have been a lot more interesting details provided. I just found there weren't necessarily. That was just my take, at least. I think if you are a person who is more interested in all things space, then I definitely wouldn't knock it and you might want to pick it up. But I think for me, compared to all of TGR's other works, this one falls a little bit in the middle. And then the last book that I completed in July was the third book in the Windy City series, which is Caught Up, which focuses on Kai and Miller. Kai is a professional baseball player, again, for Chicago's team, and he is also a single dad. And Miller is the woman who ends up nannying for him and his son over the course of the summer. So we have single dad nanny trope as well as a summer theme romance going on in this book. And actually, first thing I want to say after having finished this book is that I realized Liz Tomford gets better with each and every one of these books. And you guys already know, I really enjoyed The Right Move quite a bit. Each book honestly just gets better and better, like in terms of her writing style, I think as well as the character development and things that she just writes about in each of these books. And I will say Kai was definitely more likable of an MMC than Xander's was, probably because we do also have the single dad aspect going on, and obviously he has to be more responsible, taking care of his young son, and still trying to play professional baseball all at the same time. And then our FMC Miller is also going through her own stuff in life and kind of having some career doubts since she is a professional pastry chef, but she's kind of hitting some roadblocks, so to speak, and is not quite sure what to do, which is why she ends up nannying for Kai. But I will say I did like the progression a bit better of Kai and Miller's relationship. I will say the book did get off to a little bit of a rocky start because there were some nicknames being used on both of the MC's parts that were kind of cringy. And just for the sake of not spoiling, I won't say what they are, but trust me when I tell you guys that I started laughing out loud. And I don't know if that's mean of me to say, but I just kind of can't help myself when it comes to reacting to certain things that are written in books. It's okay because it won't necessarily deter me from continuing the book, but I just have trouble taking things a little seriously when they come up. But anyways, other than that, I did like the plot line, again, the progression and the relationship between Kai and Miller. I think the most annoying thing about this one was because it was a summer fling, we would keep going back and forth between, oh, well, she's only here for the summer, so I can't get attached, and oh, I have no plans to stay in Chicago, so I can't get attached to him. And they'd also be thinking at the same time, oh, but I'm falling in love, and this is what it feels like to actually love someone and be in a good relationship. And I just felt like we were going back and forth, and then of course, third act conflict and breakup happens, and yeah, I was just getting a little bit annoyed because I feel like with this type of romance, they always end up together. I think it's more just of like, sometimes I don't understand why we do so much of the back and forth and like inner turmoil. Like I get it because it does kind of make for good character development, but I think as a reader, it's a little annoying sometimes because I feel like in real life, like some of us would just try to talk about it and address it, but I feel like we were just going around the topic of not being rather a long-term thing when they could have just had one or two conversations and we just didn't do that. So I was not a fan of that. Of course, some of the spice in the middle, also not my favorite, but this one was way less lusty, for lack of a better word, than the very first book. But yeah, again, there's so many great themes that Liz Tomford puts in these books of found family, and in this one specifically about sacrifice and also about finding new dreams in life, which I feel like is a theme that I've been appreciating so much in a bunch of the romances that I've been picking up this year. It's one that just keeps coming up for some reason with a bunch of authors in these new releases, but I am actually here for it. So yeah, definitely if you like any of those tropes, then definitely pick this one up. And actually, I think I'm gonna literally talk about this book next because it was the first book I picked up in August, but wait till you guys hear my review for Play Along.
Hey readers, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far, and hear me out before you hit skip. I'm so grateful for all my listeners who are with me on this reading journey, and I'd like to ask that if you haven't yet, please leave a rating and review as it helps others find the podcast. Also, please consider supporting the podcast financially as it helps me bring you more exciting content, and you'll get some extras like bonus and subscriber-only episodes, early access to new episodes, and much more. The link to donate will be in the show notes below, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com/fullybookedpod. Thank you so much again for choosing to listen to Fully Booked, and now back to the episode.
Let's get into the August wrap-up. So, for the month of August, I did read 9 books in total. I read 3 out of 6 of my monthly hopefuls, and unfortunately, we did have 1 DNF, which is not bad, but let's hope we have 0 DNFs for the rest of 2025. So the first book that I read in August was Play Along, which I did end up rating 3.75 stars, and I gave it a spice rating of 3. Now, I pretty much picked this book up almost as soon as I finished Caught Up, because we already got, again, those glimpses of Isaiah and Kennedy in Caught Up and how their relationship was and was going to be. And so I really want just to read their story immediately and see what happened with them. So in this one, we're following Isaiah, who is Kai's younger brother, and also plays on the same baseball team in Chicago. And Kennedy is, I don't know what exactly her role was. I forget what it was called, but she's basically kind of like a physical therapist who helps with physical injury and recovery for each of the players on the team. So she's basically one of the medical staff, and she's always annoyed by him. She doesn't really like him, but he's always really liked her. So it's that kind of vibe, which I always love when, especially the guy has always had a crush on the girl for a long time. And especially because Isaiah is such a golden retriever type character, and I feel like that's one of my favorite MMC personality types. Basically, after one drunken night out on the town, they accidentally get married, and then obviously to avoid PR scandals and all of that stuff, they decide to stay married for at least 6 months to a year, and then once things settle down, they'll quietly divorce and go their separate ways. Kennedy is looking forward to because she's actually trying to apply to a job in a different city. And of course, Isaiah wants the complete opposite, wants her to stay, be with him in Chicago, and continue being his wife since he's just been so hopelessly in love with her and falling in love with her. And so, yeah, we see them go on this journey of pretending to be married and going to like family and different events together. And yeah, I just really like the progression of their relationship overall. And I have to say, I'm gonna also gush about Rewind It Back in a hot minute soon, but this was the first book in the series where I had very few problems with the progression of the relationship and the conflicts and how they were resolving conflicts that were coming up. I just felt like, obviously you guys just heard me talk about Caught Up and the other books and how there were always a few issues with those characters and how they handled things in their relationship, but I feel like Isaiah and Kendi were just so much more mature in this book. It's almost, like I said, Liz Tomford just keeps getting better and better at these books, and maybe how she's writing the characters, and I could just really feel that with Isaiah and Kennedy and their relationship and the space that he left for her to, I think, make her own decisions in the end as we progressed further on in their relationship and in the story. I think it was just done really well. It wasn't annoying. It was actually pretty healthy, I'd say, in my opinion. So I really enjoyed that. And I forget if I said it in my last review, but with this one, and definitely with the last book, very minimal spice, at least compared to the first 3 books in this series. The quality of the spice is still there, obviously if you can't tell from the rating that I gave, but the amount, like in terms of the number of scenes and chapters in the book, was less. So yeah, I think obviously besides Rewind It Back, I would definitely highly recommend reading this one if you were going to pick one out of all of them in the series. And then the second book I read in August, which is actually one that bled into From July, and that was This One Summer by Jillian and Mariko Tamaki. And as you can see, it's graphic novel, which I was talking about at the start of today's episode. And I actually decided not to rate this. And I know I gave ratings to graphic novels I read at the very start of this year and late last year, but I realized that I really need a different rating system for graphic novels because storytelling and storytelling methods utilized in graphic novels, it's not the same as a regular book, and I feel like I just don't know enough about or have read enough graphic novels to be able to justify giving a rating to them. Also, especially because I feel like the art and illustration styles play a lot into the storytelling in graphic novels as well, and I'm not an art major, I don't have that much knowledge or I'm well versed in terms of art and illustration styles, and so in case you are wondering or haven't seen this book before, this is a YA graphic novel that is actually set in a small fictional beach town in Ontario, which is pretty cool because I think I vaguely remembered reading that the setting was in Canada, but I forgot that it was actually in Ontario. But yeah, it basically follows these 2 young girls, and yeah, there's summer in their lakeside cottage, and kind of this coming of age story. I forget if we ever find out how old they are in this book. I want to say they're around 12 or 13 years old though. I feel like it was mentioned in one scene. I'm gonna be honest, this book is very just for the nostalgic vibes and kind of that age where you're on the threshold, the brink of being a teen, but you're not quite there yet and you're still kind of savoring the days of being a kid and, before having to grow up. I feel like that's kind of the feel of this book. There's not really that much plot. It literally just follows them over the course of this one summer, as the book is titled. One thing I will say, though, is that the book started out lighthearted, but we did start to address some darker themes and topics in the second half of the book, and it took a bit of a turn with the story, which I wasn't really expecting, and I don't want to spoil the big things in this story, but I did want to say there is a lot discussed in terms of pregnancy and how one handles that as a woman. So I guess especially for my female listeners and readers, something to be mindful of. Yeah, I don't really have too much to say. I love the illustration style, though, I will say, in this graphic novel, and I felt like some of the scenes were just depicted really beautifully through the illustrations themselves. And otherwise, I would say this book had a very film festival type feel. Like, I feel like I could see this being made into a movie. It had, again, just that very coming of age, pure story that would just translate really well to the screen and the way that the story was told in this book. It also had that very open-ended ending, which you guys probably know as a romance reader, I have a little bit of trouble with times. I like things to be more resolved by the time we get to the end of the story, which did not happen with this. But I think if you're watching it as, again, kind of that film festival film, I feel like people like that. And I don't mind it as much in a movie. So yeah, if you want a book that has, again, some nostalgic vibes, very coming of age story, is focused kind of on girlhood and friendship, then definitely pick this one up. Plus, it is easy to get through since there's lots of illustrations. Oh, this next book, guys, this is going to be one of my favorites to talk about overall in today's wrap-up, which, if you haven't already guessed, that is Rewind It Back. This is the last book in the Windy City series, and I was honestly going to put off reading this one for a bit more. Actually, I initially planned to read it in September, but I couldn't help myself, and I ended up finishing it a month early. And I'm gonna be honest, initially I gave this a 5 stars, but having had some more time to think and reflect back, I think I would put the true rating at 4.5 stars. It doesn't quite have that true 5-star feeling for me. I feel like I rated it so highly because it was a 5-star in the series. And if any of you guys have your beloved series, then you probably understand what I mean when the last book or later book in the series just hits and it gives you a 5-star feeling for that series. I don't know if that made any sense at all. But anyways, and I ended up giving this one a 2.75 spice rating. I'll quickly go over the premise of this one, but it's pretty basic in that it's your childhood friends to lovers second chance romance. So we do get dual timeline in this book where we have a couple flashbacks in the past and we get to see Rio and Hallie at a young age meeting, becoming friends, and then slowly falling in love, and also the ultimate demise of their relationship the first time around, but also them in the present, reunited 6 years later. They literally haven't seen or spoken to each other that whole time because of the thing that happened in the past. But it just so happens that Hallie is hired to renovate Rio's home because he's looking for an interior designer or stylist to come in and help him renovate and decorate his space. And she just happens to be the one from the firm that he hires. So so they are reunited all of a sudden, and seeing each other almost every day, and the old kind of feelings and things are coming back. I'm gonna be honest, I'm totally biased because I love any childhood friends to lovers second chance romance. I eat it up every time, and I feel like some people would probably find the reason that they broke up in the first place to be annoying, and if the relationship didn't work out the first time around, then why should they try again? But I feel like this was a book where, again, she did it pretty well. I actually think the initial reason made sense. It wasn't that immature or stupid. And I know people would say that, like, oh, but it could have been avoided, which is true. But these things honestly do happen in real life. I actually wasn't personally that annoyed by it. And I think Hallie and Rio were able to come back together in a very mature way. And even just the way they handled the other like associated family relationships in this book as well. I don't want to spoil, but yeah, let's just say family and like other relationships kind of came into play in terms of their initial breakup. And so I thought that was handled very well. They were both very mature and were able to come to some healthy resolutions by the time we reached later on in the book. And of course, I love the progression of their relationship because they already had the history. So their chemistry naturally made more sense. And also them, you know, getting together in all the ways just made a lot more sense because, for lack of a better word, the other characters in the other books were very horny. And it just seemed like they were getting together and hooking up really quickly. But again, this one, because they already had the history, it just made a lot more sense. It felt a lot more natural, which I enjoyed a lot more. I think it also made the spice scenes more enjoyable for the parts that I did skim a little and read. Yeah, I just really didn't have that many complaints with this book. It was a pretty good end to the series. Like, Liz Tomford just knew what she was doing and knew what the readers wanted, because we've been waiting for Rio's story since Mile High. We already had a little glimpse of him, and, you know, we're probably wondering this whole time why he's been single, and now we know, and it just really made a lot of sense to make this a second chance romance in this story, and just explained a lot about Rio's character, I felt like, as well. And I think after having read this book, I would highly recommend that you actually don't skip books in the series and that you read them all in order, even though you could technically pick and choose. They're technically interconnected standalones, but I think to get the impact of this final book, really go and read the whole Windy City series. And then the next book, which is another one I'm also pretty excited to talk to you guys about, is Wild Reverence by Rebecca Ross, which I rated 4 stars. And I was one of the lucky few who did get the e-arc for this one, so thank you again to NetGalley and St. Martin's Press for providing me the opportunity to get to read that early. But yeah, for those of you who don't know, this is a prequel that is set in the Divine Rivals world, and we follow one of the goddesses, Matilda, and a boy who later becomes a lord, Vincent, and their story, but mostly Matilda's story, coming into her powers. But yeah, we basically have kind of this battle going on for the land because Vincent's uncle Grimold feels that he rightfully owns the land because basically their father, or Vincent's grandfather, decided to pass down the land and the estate to his father, who was the second born, and Grimold is the firstborn. So he feels it is rightfully his, even despite their father's choice. And then Matilda and Vincent end up running into each other in the mortal realm, and she becomes entangled in this battle. And she and Vincent, they actually know each other from the past because she appears to Vincent in his dreams as a child. So there's some sort of soulmate connection kind of going on here. So when they finally run into each other in the mortal realm, they actually already know each other. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if I'm a fan of this kind of romantasy trope yet. I probably just don't read enough fantasy and romantasy to know about this trope as much and to get into it. But anyways, I will say though, the things I did enjoy about this book, Rebecca Ross has just really solidified herself as such a beautiful and lyrically descriptive writer. I feel like her writing has slowly gotten better too with each book that she writes, although I will say the amount of times that she used the word limb and limbed, actually not only in this book, but across all of her books, I really should have been counting. She really likes to repeat certain words, but that's more of an interesting observation, not necessarily a complaint. I still love and enjoy her writing so much overall. Also, this book is such a perfect read for the fall time. Definitely would recommend that you save this to read in the fall. I also recommend that you read these books in the published order, so go read the Divine Rivals duology first before reading this one, because there were definitely some very small Easter eggs in this one that were sprinkled throughout, and obviously you're not going to catch those if you read this book before you read Divine Rivals. So that's my personal recommendation. And because of the beautifully descriptive writing style, this book does feel very cozy, even though there is plots and there's literally a battle and war going on. it was still done in a cozy way. Like every time I picked up this book, it kind of feels like you're reading a bedtime story. It's kind of this very weird juxtaposition I feel like that Rebecca Ross does in her novels, but she's able to do it and do it so well. I would say if you're a very typical fantasy reader, like you like a lot of world building, high stakes politics in your fantasy books, then Rebecca Ross's novels are probably not going to be for you. But I feel like if you're more of a beginner, you're just starting to dive into fantasy, but you're not ready for all of the high stakes, then I feel like her books are a very good way to start diving into the fantasy genre, because just the coziness, and again, the writing style is a lot different from the usual high stakes fantasy books that are being written nowadays. I just feel like Rebecca Ross breathes a little bit of fresh air into the fantasy and romantasy genre. But yeah, again, I will say, I think I just liked the coziness and the writing style of this book overall. I did enjoy some of the lore and learning about what happens with the gods and their different powers and, you know, how that all works in this world. But I feel like I'm not the type of person that enjoys the lore like as much in a book typically. Like I was kind of hoping to get more romance for sure between our two MCs in this book, and yeah, the romance just didn't quite go as I thought it would, which is okay because again, the stuff that I did enjoy made up for that. And then the second last book I'm going to talk about in today's wrap up, this is one that it was actually my third time around reading it, so that should already tell you how much I enjoyed this book, and that was The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. You guys have probably already heard this book by now. I feel like it's one of those books that considered a modern classic, and obviously they made the movie a couple years ago with Logan Lerman and Emma Watson. The movie for this book is actually pretty good as well. I would highly recommend that you watch the movie. In case you guys don't know, this book is a YA contemporary novel that centers on a boy named Charlie who is going through his first year of high school and all the firsts that come along with that, and it's a very typical coming of age story, but it also does go through a lot of darker themes and topics, especially because Charlie goes through a couple traumatic things in his childhood that he is still dealing with and processing in this book. And I will say, the one thing I love about rereading books that are so beloved to me is that I always pick up on something different than the first time I read it. Because the first time around, I was actually Charlie's age. So I was around 14 or 15 the first time I read this book, and I feel like I just focused a lot and took away from this book a lot on the themes of friendship and youth and kind of that nostalgic feeling of your teens and yeah, and living life and enjoying it when you're young. And I feel like I picked up a lot on like the family themes and topics addressed in this book. Like honestly, they cut out so much in the movie about Charlie's other relationships, like with his sister and his teacher, that I wish could have been included somehow. But yeah, I feel like there was so many scenes with his sister that showed so much about Charlie's character and how deeply he actually feels and cares about the ones he loves. And the way he was able to describe and process like family and generational trauma and those cycles, I feel like his voice was just so mature in the way he was able to process things. I feel like I was definitely not thinking and processing as deeply when I was his age. And yeah, the way he was just able to articulate were just, I don't know, so profound to me, and it was just interesting to pick that up this time around. Yeah, I feel like the movie just emphasizes a lot more on, again, friendship and youth as a teen, and yeah, the nostalgia of that stage of life. But yeah, there were so many other good themes they could have included. I think another thing that I picked up this time around was, I don't know, just how sweet and caring Charlie's character is. For example, I feel like as a giver, his love language was gifts, and he actually gave people gifts that were meaningful to them because he understood them so well. And people, like the other characters' friends in this book, did not appreciate that, and I felt so bad at times because I knew, no, I would appreciate that if I were Charlie's friend or if I knew him in real life. And so, yeah, I just wish the other characters could see more of how much he actually cared. And yes, it is probably true, he probably did need to participate and vocalize that love more. And yeah, I just wish the other characters would be able to see that. Also, I never really said my rating for this book. I have no clue what I rated this book the first time around because I did not use Goodreads. But I feel like when I reread, I'm less focused on rating and more just focused on enjoying the book and getting something different out of it. And so, yeah, I just gave this one a 5 stars because usually if I'm rereading a book, it probably was a 5-star or close to a first time around. So yeah, this is definitely, if you can't tell, a beloved book of mine. And this is actually one of the books that when people ask me, what is your favorite book of all time? This is the book that I tell them. So highly recommend it to you. It's also nice. It actually is a pretty short book as well. Like, it's one that if you have a lot of time, you could read it in one day or one sitting. And yeah, very easy to get through. The language, the writing style is very simple in this one, pretty easy to understand. Yeah, again, highly recommend it. Plus, you can go watch the movie afterwards if you haven't yet. And then the last book for today's wrap-up and for what I read in August is Taste by Stanley Tucci, which I did read all on audio, and I ended up rating this one 3.5 stars. And this is basically just Stanley Tucci's life story and memoir told through memories of food. She has a lot of them growing up in a big Italian family, having home-cooked meals from his mom every single day. He definitely grew up eating very well, I will say that, and that's something I could definitely relate to a lot reading through this memoir. I do want to preface that if you are not a foodie and you find long descriptions of food and dishes boring, then I would personally recommend skipping this memoir, because I would say 90% of this book was honestly descriptions of some of his favorite dishes and how they related to different times of his life. So I feel like you'll find that boring if you don't enjoy food. But on the flip side, if you are a foodie and do enjoy eating a lot, and it's particularly if you love Italian food, you'll definitely love this book. And I will say, Stanley Tucci definitely delivered on the narration part. Obviously, most actors are very animated in their storytelling, and he just definitely delivered when he was recounting all these different memories and stages of his life, and also in the way he was able to describe food so richly and descriptively. I didn't realize that some writers or people even are not necessarily able to describe food in a very interesting way, and you do have to be a very descriptive writer when you are talking about food. And you guys have probably seen him in other movies like The Hunger Games, The Lovely Bones. He's been in many movies. He also was in Julie and Julia, which obviously that is a big movie for all of us food lovers. And he also talks about that movie briefly in this memoir. I was a little surprised he didn't talk about it more, considering, again, how much that movie is based around food and cooking. But I also didn't realize how much of the rest of his life and other memories were tied to food. I think hearing about the different stages of his life and relating it to his favorite dishes was quite an interesting way to tell his life story and write a memoir. I think my biggest gripe with this book was that half of it read like a cookbook. Like, he would have these long passages literally in the middle or right at the end of a chapter where he would talk about a favorite dish, and then he would literally give the entire recipe for it. Like, he would give the amounts of each ingredient and the steps to make it. So basically recipes. And I felt like if he was gonna do that, like, he should have made an appendix at the end of the book instead of putting them in the middle and throughout the story, because I felt like he was taking me out of his life story. Like, I wanted to hear more about his actual life and what was happening, and not be reading like these long passages of recipes. I personally could have done without them, even like taking them out completely. But at the least, if there had been an appendix and they'd all been listed in there, if you really want to go and see these recipes, then they would be available. But yeah, that was my biggest thing with this book, and that could have been done differently. But otherwise, honestly, such a delightful read still overall. And that now brings my July and August reading wrap up to a close. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about all those different books, and I do realize that the bi-monthly wrap-ups are going to be longer than the monthly wrap-ups were, so I really do appreciate you guys for sticking around for the whole of today's episode. Quick announcement before we go, just a reminder, no new episode next week for now, but we will be back October 7th with another one, so stay tuned for that. Otherwise, I'd love to hear what you guys read in the months of July and August, or what you're currently reading or trying to finish in September. And as always, rate and review the podcast wherever you listen, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Audio and video episodes all go up on the YouTube channel, but I'm also hoping to put up some extra fun videos for the fall and Halloween season. So you definitely want to go subscribe so you don't miss any of those. But with all that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you back here in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you were able to take away something, and be sure to follow the podcast for more bookish content. Until next time, stay fully booked, and I'll talk to you soon.